The first one that I'm going to show is in the Heidelberg region. So it's a direct suburb of Heidelberg. So very good location in the Rhein-Neckar region, where of course the rental yield that you get is lower than, for example, in the second property that we will discuss, which is in the Kaiserslautern region, where you can get very good cash flow deals, for example. So you own the property in the Kaiserslautern region. I also own properties in the Kaiserslautern region. I really like that because you get a very good cash flow, as we will see, right? So the first one is very good location. The second one, very good cash flow. Both are possibilities, depends on just what you like, right? But let me show both to you with concrete numbers and examples. The first one is, again, near Heidelberg. It's 83 square meters, cost 273,000 euros, right? So 3,300 per square meter, which is a very good price. Again, a property like this will never go on in Moscow. There you will have to buy for 4,500, something like that. Right? Yeah. So your closing costs in this case are 28,000 euros. Whether now you have to use all that or not, we can discuss in a second, because we can, in many cases, finance all of those costs, except the makler basically cost, which is how we make money, the 3.5%. So 9,000 in this instance, which is the brokerage fee. So basically, all the costs above, we can, in many cases, finance also, right? So that means that either you put in 28,000, or if we finance the entire closing cost, except the makler, then you put in basically just a 9,000 or 10,000 initially, and the rest will be financed. Right? But you always need to have it. Even if you finance it, you need to show the bank, I have it. Right? The rental income with this one is 960 euros per month, so it's already rented out, and 50 euros for a car parking, exactly. Right? Your mortgage is going to be, when we finance 100%, your mortgage is going to be 1,200 euros approximately. The interest rate is 4% for this example. Right? When we finance 100%, then it's 4% interest. You will see when we finance more than 100%, then it's 4.3 approximately. So your mortgage is 1,200 euros. That means when we look at the cash flow, which is the important thing for the first 10 years, then you get your rental income. You have basically the cost that you cannot charge the renter. So in this case, including, very important, including the property management. So we always calculate including property management.
Nice.
So 133 is the cost. So 83 euros is the nicht umlagefähige Hausgeld. So that's like the part that you cannot charge the renter. Plus 50 euros is what most property management services cost per apartment per month. So overall, you have 133 euros in cost that you cannot charge a renter for. Right? Of course, stuff like heating, insurance, property taxes, all of that is charged on the renter. It's just liquidity that you pay and then charge the renter. Right? So yeah, you pay interest, of course, and you pay back the loan. So you end up with an operating cash flow of negative 300. So basically, you need to, there's 300 euros more going out than coming in each month. With this property, as it's in a very good location. Right? Now, normally you can depreciate 2% of your property's value, right? But what you can do is, which is basically an expert confirming that you can use a higher depreciation for the property. In this case, we get 4.2%. Right? That means you can save a lot of taxes with this property. As you see here in this example, you save almost 400 euros in taxes each month with this property, as you can deduct the entire interest and you can deduct the entire depreciation. Right? So that means even after taxes, essentially, your property is cash flow positive. It pays for itself. Right? Doesn't matter if it's 60 euro positive, 6 euro negative, or 20 or 0 on 0. The point is it pays for itself. Right? With the tax advantage. Of course, the better the location, the more negative it will be. And then maybe with some tax advantages, we can even that out. But this is a very nice example of a good location where, again, it pays for itself.
Yeah, just to add one thing so that it clarifies if someone was asking themselves this doubt. So for people who are seeing this cash flow nach Steuern, which is cash flow after the taxes. So you would be paying every month 328 euros from your packet, from your bank. And then once you do your tax declaration, then you will get 391 times 12 to your back to your bank account, so that you will have cash flow positive of after Steuer, cash flow positive.
Exactly.
So just that people know with this.
Yeah, so you should have the 5,000 liquidity when you buy this property.
True.
Obviously. Yeah. So that's for the first 10 years, always the important thing. What is your cash flow and what is your rental yield, which is still 4.5%, which is very good for this sort of location. So in the first 10 years, what's important? What's your cash flow? Now, after 10 years, when you want to sell, what happens there? So we always calculate very conservatively. We always calculate just with the 2% inflation goal of the central bank in Europe. So we just calculate we have 2% inflation. Nothing above that. Means your cost rise 2%, your rent rises 2%, and your property value rises 2%. Now we both know that in many locations that of course has been way more, especially the rent, everything basically, the rents have been rising way more than 2%. Also, the costs have been rising way more than 2%, and many locations the appreciation also was more than 2%, of course. But we calculate very conservative always. So basically that you have in your head the worst case, right? Like a very conservative appreciation. And then when it's more than that, I think nobody did complain yet when it was more than that. So with that 2%, how does that look in 10 years, which is what we see here, right? So your real estate is worth then 339,000, right? You still have remaining debt as a mortgage of 225,000. You paid in initially as equity 28,000 euros, and you get accumulated cash flow of 11,000 euros over the years, right? That means your netto profit, so your after-tax profit, right, is almost 100,000 euros.
That's really great.
So, which is like very good from a 28,000 euro investment to make 100,000 euros profit in 10 years.
This is a really great.
Just as an example, when you invested 28 in ETFs and you have a very good standard average return of 7 to 9%, then it approximately doubles. So from 10 to 8, you make 28K profit, and then you have to pay taxes on that. So just that you get like an example there. And this is why real estate investment can be so lucrative, essentially, because from 28, you can make 100. Now, of course, when we say, hey, we want to even bring less equity into that, right? So out of this 28,000, we only want to pay the 9,000 and finance the other 20,000. Then, of course, we need to add 20,000 to the financing here. So we're at 293,000, like really rough numbers right now to just calculate, right? Then, of course, our interest will also not be 4%. It will be more like 4.2, 4.3%. Let's put 4.3 to be conservative. That means your operating cash flow will now be minus 500 approximately. You save even more taxes because you have more interest to deduct. So you save 450 euros taxes each month. So still the property more or less pays for itself. So you have to put in 40 euros after taxes in each month. So then, of course, the profit calculation becomes even more insane because you only put in 8,000 euros initially. That's all you put in initially. Only our broker's fee you paid, and the rest was financed. And you still make 87,000 euros in profit of that. Yes, it's 10,000 euros less, but you also put in way less money initially. So out of 8,000 euros, you made 80,000 after tax profit. So this is then, of course, the optimum scenario, which doesn't always work, right? You need to have a good salary for that. And of course, the banks also need to agree with it, and the seller needs to agree with it. But in some cases, that's possible. And that's, of course, a great scenario, which allows you to buy many properties when you use as little equity as possible. Right? You always need to have the 10%, and in most cases, you also need to use it. But in some cases, is what I'm saying, we can even have less than 10% down payment. Nice. So this would be the first property that I brought as an example with a very good location. Where it's cash flow negative, you save some taxes, but you need to pay in a bit each month. Nice. The second one, or before we get to the second one, any questions regarding this calculation?
No, I think the way how you have put this in one single chart and then it was really is, as I know or have seen this many times, for me it was very easy to understand. But also just to get the overall high level overview, it's a really nice. And then just people can see that if someone who wants to invest or get started invested with this real estate, there is a huge opportunity for them to own it. Yes, the profits are high for sure, but owning a property comes with bit more of work than you having an ETF. So this is something someone has to keep in mind. But still, if this is something you're passionate about, if this is something which you'd like to explore and go forward, I think it's still a really nice investment opportunity because the stakes are not too high. So there are so many edge cases are actually covered through buying the properties in Germany. So it's not okay, you buy it and then all of a sudden you have a surprise of 100,000 euros that you have to pay from your pocket. So that won't happen. The probability is very low. So that being said, I think it's a really nice investment option for someone considering.
And like always have the worst cases in mind. So for example, the worst cases, you always hear stories of Mietnomaden, right? So people that basically, it's like the horror story of every German and many expats, of course, people who rent your apartment, then don't pay the rent and trash your apartment essentially. That's Mietnomaden. And like many people are afraid of that. But like the statistics just is 1 out of 20,000.
Yeah.
So people are afraid of that. But it's like you need to buy 20,000 apartments in order to have one Mietnomaden. But let's say, again, calculate with the worst case. Let's say you're the very unlucky guy. You buy one apartment, Nomade, which let's say you're really the really unlucky guy. Right? Then what is the worst case? You don't get rent. Okay, now you have a 1,300 euro mortgage that you need to pay. Now you need to get this guy out of the apartment. That can take some time, right? If you go the pragmatical road, then you tell your property manager, hey, go there, bring 2,000 euros in cash and tell this guy, hey, obviously it's not working. Please move out. You get 2,000 euros to move out for the next place. Good luck. And most of the case, it then works like this. If nothing works, then of course you need to have a Räumungsklage, which is not as big as it sounds, like basically submitting a document with the court that says, hey, this person hasn't been paying rent for 3 or 4 months. I want to get him out. And then they process it, and this can take up to 9 months to a year. Right? So like the worst cases that you have is, okay, you need to pay this for 10, 12 months. So you need to have 13, 15,000 euros aside. But that again, that is 1 out of 20,000. And then of those cases, half of them cost less than 10,000 euros. So yes, there are horror scenarios, and yes, you can be the very unlucky guy. But even if you are, right, when you have 15, 20,000 aside for property like this, you cover the worst basically thing that can happen to you. And again, with most cases, you own it for 10 years and there's never a repair and never any tenants not paying. Right? So out of the 6 apartments, nobody ever did not pay the rent. Right? Sometimes with one apartment, it comes a bit late. Then the property manager sends a reminder and say, oh yeah, I forgot it. And then they transfer.
Yeah.
Keep the worst cases in mind, but most of the time it will run smoothly.
It will work out,
All right.